Hey everybody, so today I just thought I'd answer a few of your questions. I recently put up a community post seeing if anybody had anything to ask me, and it looks like about 26 of you did. Or there's 26 comments, some of those might be replies to comments, but I got a pretty good number of questions, so I'm going to answer all those today. I thought that'd be a fun way to interact with you all, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm also going to take one question that was not on the community post or in my Patreon, which I'm going to cover those first, just because I thought it was interesting. And that was just my opinion about religion in general. If we set aside Christianity and Islam and all the Western religious traditions, what do I think of some of the other ones? So that'll be nearer the end too. I wanted to cover that one just because I thought it sounded interesting, but I didn't want to put it ahead of all the people who actually answered for the sake of this video. So anyway, let's go. First, we have composer Everett, longtime donor and friend of this channel. Do you think Stranger Things is going to kill off Lucas? My 15-year-old daughter will be devastated if so. Do you think the Duffer Brothers will learn the lesson of The Last Jedi, which is go ahead and give them fan service, or at least don't dish out fan disservice and thus learning the lesson, allow the entire core cast to live? Unfortunately, as much as a cool person as composer Everett is, and I mean this sincerely, I just don't really know how to answer this question in that I've not watched Stranger Things since season 1. I enjoyed season 1. It was fun. For some reason, I started to and never really got that into it. And I don't know if it's the quality or just where I was at the time when I started watching it, but it felt repetitive. Part of it might be I kind of wish that Stranger Things had done what I think it had originally planned and been an anthology series where each season was about a different set of people, and it was just each one was a unique story set in the 80s in kind of a Spielberg-like supernatural kids adventure story. I kind of wish I lived in the universe where that happened just so we would have that, but also I wouldn't want to take away the fact that you seem to have enjoyed the series as it is so far. But really, I just don't know. I have no clue if they're going to kill off Lucas. I'm sorry for your daughter if she doesn't like that. I could see the value in them letting everyone live, but I don't know enough about the show to give you an informed answer, and I'm sorry that you're a patron and you asked this question, and I'm not much good to you. Sorry. Chaos a lot. Which sci-fi canon was the most spot on? I don't know. I used to like Star Trek and Star Wars. I guess I've become a little bit of a pragmatist in terms of the science fiction I like to watch and what I think of their canon. Here's the thing with canon. What you mean by spot on depends. In terms of scientific accuracy, maybe the 2001 A Space Odyssey canon, even though it's just one movie, so I don't know if it qualifies as having a canon. I like the Asimov robot stories. They have some interesting philosophical things about technology and how we interact with them, and I think it boils how we should program artificial intelligences down to some interesting laws. And it shows the robots expounding on those laws or extrapolating from them to create new laws. So I think that's all pretty cool. But I just don't know. I'm sorry. I guess I'm being of almost no use to the patrons who are asking me questions, and I just feel super bad about that. I don't know. I guess I just don't know because I'm not that much into sci-fi canon, and I've grown to a place where I just pick the shows and movies I like within a canon and don't like the ones I don't like. So sorry, I'm very bad at answering this question. Maybe I can be more help with your next question. What's your favorite Philip K. Dick novel? Short answer is, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's the obvious one, I guess, because that's the one Blade Runner was based on. And so I guess people tend to go read that one. But that's the novel I've read. Sorry. I do like a lot of his short stories, though, to give you an actual answer for once. I like, let me look these up real quick. Sorry. Minority Report is good, even though it's kind of weirdly sexist, I think. It's just a product of its time. A lot of these old science fiction stories that I admire are. We can remember It For You Wholesale, which I think is the one they based Total Recall on. So that one's pretty cool. One I really like that's not connected to any other property and might be my favorite of his short stories is Paycheck. And that's one where somebody did a job. He can't remember what he did because taking away his memory was part of that job. And so he has to come to terms with who he was when he did that job, whether he needs to take responsibility for his actions and what that looks like when you can't remember what you did, and also just questions of identity. Obviously, he had done those things, but if he can't remember it, was that actually him versus someone else? It's very much a severance type thing where you become kind of two different people, and the person who doesn't remember that stuff anymore kind of doesn't exist. Maybe the reason I read Paycheck is because somebody referred it to me when I was talking about severance. I don't know. But yeah, that's some of the Philip K. Dick stuff I like. And I mentioned short stories, even though they weren't within the parameters of your question, just because I felt like that was better than just saying I like the book that Blade Runner was based on. So going to our actual community post, which is where most of you posted your questions. We have a heavy one here to start with, but I'm just going to do these in order. Hi, Mr. Zod. Love your work. My question would be, do you ever feel hopeless in regards with all the outright injustice and impunity that we see every day, knowing there's no ultimate consequences as our systems keep failing to bring any? And if you do, how do you deal/cope with that feeling? Keep up the great content. Well, thank you about the content. About all the other stuff, I feel like this is alluding to the election of Donald Trump and what that means for all of us and the fact that he never gets held to account for anything. If that's true, yeah, that's a complicated question. I started feeling very hopeless. I didn't sleep the night he was elected, and I was just kind of in a fog after that. I've since over time slowly come to a certain peace with it, but that peace feels weird because this lingering sense of dread is just hanging out there, like life is going to be different sometime really soon. But I set that aside and just operate mostly normally. So it's this weird feeling of almost being in denial where I know that's out there somewhere, but I'm just living life and enjoying it for now and doing my best to be the best citizen and person I can in the meantime and be as supportive as I can to others. Partly the reason I'm having that experience is because I am in a demographically relatively privileged position as, a straight white male in a relatively safe neighborhood. A lot of the stuff doesn't currently impact me the way it impacts others. And so my mind can kind of set some of that aside in ways that maybe other people can't right now. And so I'm trying to, obviously, in my voting and how I support other people and in my content, which I've tried to make a combination of opinion and just allowing things to be a distraction so I'm not always a downer. That helps me, and hopefully it also helps other people too. And I'm always trying to find the balance of how to do that. Part of this is when I talk about demographic differences between me and others, maybe it's coping, but it's also just the way I view this whole thing, is recognizing this isn't that unusual. In the broad scale of history, people get away with things with impunity and always have throughout all of history. I feel like we've lived relatively sheltered lives in the last several decades. If you're parts of certain demographics, our society, broadly speaking, has been fairly progressive compared to a lot of others throughout history, not as much as still others. But we've been in a place where certain freedoms were taken for granted, at least for some of us. And so we're seeing that decline to some extent, but that's been history. And so recognizing that a lot of people have been through this same thing and they fought back against it, and we're just going through a rough time that is fairly common, that might help, even if it doesn't alleviate a lot of your anxiety. Maybe it normalizes it for you a little bit and helps you recognize there might be some hope on the other side. We just don't know what that looks like right now. Also just recognizing this isn't so unusual for a lot of other demographics within our current society. Part of what you have to acknowledge is that if you're a fairly privileged person and your life has been fairly comfortable in this country, you're maybe just facing the possibility of some of the fear and injustices that people have already dealt with before. Maybe this will give you a little more empathy for them, and maybe this will help you adopt some of the causes and struggles that they've just been going through this entire time. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be worse now. I think it will be, but maybe this fear for your own personal safety and what society will look like for you, and I'm saying this for me too, will help you maybe sympathize with and ally yourself with others a little bit better. Just in the broad strokes though, yeah, that's just the way it is, and nobody's ever going to face ultimate consequences, and really consequences can just amount to revenge unless those consequences are setting somebody right and making things better for society. So partly, I think you just have to recognize that whether a bad person suffers for what they did is neither here nor there in terms of your experience or whether life improves for other people. So just trying to make life improve for as many people as you can. You have to just cope with the fact that some people are going to get away with stuff and you can't save everybody. I hope that helped to some degree. As a fellow Alaskan, the city dweller variety, how are you feeling about the state? Between politics, price increases, general global warming issues, it has become a lot less the home I was born and raised in. Yeah, things have changed a lot. Part of the trick for this question for me is separating what's just general change with change related to Alaska. I'm a city dweller in the sense that, well, maybe the same sense as you are, in that I live in the somewhat Anchorage area. And so life for me is similar to life, I think, in a lot of the United States. Politics and price increases, I don't know that I feel like that impacts me here differently than other places. We're a red state. Things are a little more expensive here. But if you live in an urban area like Anchorage, urban by Alaska standards, prices aren't, I don't think, that bad compared to like a lot of the West Coast. And if they are, I don't know that it's to a different extent than it used to be. You can't get stuff quickly shipped up here, and a lot of times they just won't ship things up here for you. Global warming and climate change, I don't feel like that hits me hard where I live. And part of the thing is Alaska literally spans about as much area as the continental U.S., not in square miles, but just in as far as it goes north to south, east to west with all its peninsulas and stuff. So we're a really big area, and a lot of things can happen in one area that feels as abstract to you as it does to people in the rest of the country. And so a lot of the global warming has impacted people on the tundra or up on the western coast of the state, where I'm never going to see. We've had a lot of refugees come in from villages that were flooded and their homes washed away and stuff. But, I don't know that I see a lot of difference in life as an Alaskan. Like, I see a lot of changes, and it's hard for me to separate changes in Alaska from just changes in the world in general, and then just changes as life changes for me and I get older. So I guess that's just how I feel about it. I don't think I have a really specific answer to your question. Other than that, it's kind of a complicated question to me. But yeah, life's changing a lot, and it's hard for me to separate Alaska change from general change. I do like your approach to apologetics. I enjoy your work with Dan. That's on the stream Zodanza I do. I have a 2-part question. What made you pick Brad Stine to focus on? The second part is, why is Brad Stine? Any sufficiently fine-tuned universe would have a complete absence of Brad Stines, so why is Brad Stine? So to answer your first question, we didn't pick Brad Stine. Brad Stine picked us. I guess it was just kind of fate. We never set out to address Brad Stine or have a thing for him or anything like that. This all started with a stream where we talked about Christians mocking atheists, because Christians complain about atheists mocking them or the world mocking them. And so we just came up with some examples of Christians who make fun of atheists and show that there's a double standard there. Dan was appalled by Brad Stine, and so we just ended up covering more of him, and then thought it'd be fun to get a book, and the thing just grew on its own. So that's how Brad Stine ended up being part of our lives. As far as the question of why Brad Stine, why any sufficiently fine-tuned universe wouldn't have it. So why, the thing is, I don't believe in a fine-tuned universe. So random things happen, like, tumors growing on the faces of Tasmanian devils and Brad Stine becoming a successful comic. And that's all the chaos and horror that we just need to expect in a universe where random things happen. We just don't get to be sheltered from that because the universe is a cold, terrible place where things happen. Sorry, Brad Stine is just there. If you feel like dipping your toes in it, I'd be curious about your thoughts of Alex O'Connor's pivot to the right-wing adjacent podcast, bro. Kind of seems like he's following the Richard Dawkins playbook. And additionally, why so many atheist content creators seem to drop the skeptical thinking when it comes to other things we've been indoctrinated into, like capitalism and American imperialism. And then I don't want to read this whole thing, but it goes into how a lot of thinking and politics stems from religious sectarianism, and people drop their atheism or their actual religious belief, but still hang on to some of that stuff. I don't mind dipping my toe into the Alex O'Connor's thing. He seemed like an okay young man. I met him personally at a Faithless forum. He actually, with some other people, came up to my hotel room, and I'll put some footage of that over this if I can find it. And we did a recording of a show that I'm not going to talk about because that show kind of sucked and a lot of bad came from it, and there were bad people involved in it. I didn't know that at the time. So anyway, I think he was like 19 at the time that I met him. He was very, very bright, very, very articulate, obviously. I don't really want to comment on him in any dramatic way or judge him as a person. And I don't know a ton about him or the turn he's taken. But what I perceive from him is that he's been very successful, gotten a lot of attention, and he seems to be taking the maybe Joe Rogan approach. I think somebody's compared him to Joe Rogan, and that maybe this is just what got this in my mind. They're softening his edges to make himself palatable to people he wants to engage with for content and also to different audiences, and kind of just taking the celebrity route. So I feel like there could be a little bit of selling out in that. I don't know. I don't want to judge Alex. But yeah, I think he's found a way to get a lot more mainstream recognition and celebrity. And whether it was consciously or not, that probably involved watering himself down a little bit and just becoming more things to more people. I don't know. The whole right-wing thing, how can people question religion but still buy into things that seem to stem from that? I don't think that people always recognize how those things stem from religion. So once you take the blinders off, and that's a condescending way to put it. Let me rephrase that. Once you're changing shifts to the point that seeing supernatural beliefs for what they are becomes palatable and viable for you, and you recognize that, the supernatural really isn't an evident part of reality, and you question that, that's one shift in your thinking that can be relatively straightforward once that becomes acceptable for you socially and in your own attachment to religion. But all the things that stem from that, political opinions, just ways you view our country and other countries, that stuff can be so hardwired and so ingrained in you, it could just take some time to get out of there. And you might just be attached to that. And it takes you time to think your way through it to see how your religious beliefs informed that. And you might never get there. Some of it might just be you're attached to those for natural reasons of bias that maybe stem from religion, but that bias can stay there even after you've questioned religion. I think this is all pretty natural. It took me a while to flush a lot of religiously based ideas out of my system or opinions after I had become an atheist. And even then, I was a fairly progressive Christian, I think, toward the end of my time as a Christian. And I was just hanging on just because it was my identity and I couldn't quite let it go. So once I became an atheist, a lot of that shut off pretty quickly. But there were still individual things that it took me time to recognize, hey, I only believe in this because of religion, and just let it go. But sometimes, atheists are just a broad group of people who stop believing for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes that reason is just contrarianism. And so if you're a contrarian edgelord and that factors into why you give up religion, it might factor into you just wanting to be edgy and contrarian about certain left-wing beliefs. It's hard to account for all atheists just because there are a lot of them. It is really fun that somebody decided to go, how about the opposite? Most atheist YouTubers are actually leftists and seem to ignore rationality and logic when it comes to their DEI and socialist utopia and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, go f*** yourself. That's all I have to say to that. Leftists and liberals can be irrational in some ways. Yeah, that's fine. That happens. But, if you use DEI as an automatic criticism, you probably don't know what it is. And you're probably just a right-wing reactionary. Jay Norris, if you feel that way, you're probably going to be happier watching people other than me. You're welcome here. Your journey is your journey. If you like watching me talk about other things, fine. I just don't think I'm really inclined to entertain or expound upon a equivalency between left and right wing positions at this point in time. Next question, what is your favorite kind of turtle? This is an interesting question because I'm not sure we live in a society where people have interacted with enough turtles that they are going to have a strong preference for one over the other. I've probably, in real life, in terms of real back and forth interaction, I've probably met enough where I could count them on one hand. I've seen them on TV, I've seen them at a pet store, but I never really got a sense of who they were or whether I would prefer the company or any form of interaction of one over another. So yeah, this is a hard one. I guess I'm just going to have to say red-eared slider because my son had one And so that's just the one I knew. He was all right. Turtles are a lot of work. They seem like they'd be durable because they have shells and stuff, but they get sick really easily, and you just have to really keep their tank clean and keep their temperature of their water just right. They're vulnerable to infections, and also they're going to infect you if you don't wash your hands after handling them. So just little bonus life lesson there. Be careful with turtles. Would you consider playing the DLC downloadable content for Outer Wilds? I'm unsure how far through you made it, but it adds a self-contained new world that I think emphasizes and expands on the concepts you talked about in your previous video. It made me genuinely break down in tears and is going to be the next tattoo I get when I save up the money for it. Not only would I consider it, but I've played through the whole thing. So that's anticlimactic, sorry. I do adore the fact that you put downloadable content in parentheses. Nothing sarcastic with you. I appreciate the consideration in terms of you looking at somebody who looks like me and recognizing that I might need that in parentheses so I know what you're talking about. So genuinely, thank you. Yeah, I played the whole game with the help of one of my sons. I know you're alluding to my video about the emotional power of video games. And I talked a lot about Outer Wilds 1 there. I'm not even sure if I mentioned Outer Wilds 2, but that was not only an enjoyable game and an emotionally impactful game, but one I really enjoyed playing with my sons. So I mentioned in my video, I played the first game with my son right before he went to college, and that really impacted how I felt about the game, obviously. When he came back for Christmas break once, he tried to get me to play Outer Wilds 2, and he found that he was rushing me through it in order to get me to finish it before he left. And that's not the experience he wanted to have. He wanted me to have with the game, or wanted to have sharing it with me. And so it fell by the wayside. And then my youngest of the three sons, got me to play it with him. And it was actually pretty cool. It has a lot of the same themes. Obviously, you're still living in the time circle. And if you don't want to hear about the Outer Wilds expansion, maybe just skip ahead a little bit. I'll probably put chapters in this whole thing. But yeah, you travel in a circle, and you keep experiencing the same thing as you travel circles through the space station. And to me, that adds to the circular/linear experience you're having and how you keep re-experiencing things. Also, I don't know the name of the scary elk people, whatever, but I like how you view their past through slideshows, and actually, I think you go through like a simulation of their existence or something. Sorry, I don't understand this better. And that just very vividly captures the lost past thing. Side note, my son made an image of one of them in art. Here, let me grab that and show you. Yeah, he made this with chalk, and I think it's really cool. So yeah, short answer, I've played it, and it was really good. I agree with you about that game. I probably have less inclination than you do to get a tattoo of it. And that doesn't speak to how much I care about the game. I don't know that I'm ever going to get a tattoo. Do you like board/card games? If so, do you have any favorites? Games other than regular ones like Monopoly, poker, or similar? Yeah, I really do like board games. I don't play Monopoly like some noob. Yeah, Monopoly's fine. Games like that are fine. They don't really capture my interest. I like games with a certain amount of strategy where you have to put some thought in, but they're relaxed enough that you can just kind of chill with other people, which I think is part of the point of a board game. So the ones that fall into the comfortable middle for me are what they call, I think, German-style games. So like Settlers of Catan is an obvious one. I really like Dominion. That's more of a card game where you build a civilization. So those are a lot of fun. I just have never really gotten the time I would like to play them. It's not time, it's more people to play them with. One recently that I got into was called Cascadia. It's one where you put down tiles with animals on them, I think. It's relaxed, it's just the right amount of gameplay, and it's fun to play with people. And considering how many games are about establishing dominance or maybe battle and everything, because I feel like that feels satisfying in a gaming environment. There's this sense of cleaning things up or claiming it or building something up. I kind of like Cascadia's vibe just because it's about nature and making things friendly places for animals to live. And I just enjoyed something about that. One of the reasons I'm a big fan is that everything you do seems high quality, both thoughtful and polished. Any secret tips for achieving either of these or for high quality production in some other way? Well, first off, thank you very much for that question. And you're my favorite person now so far in this question answering process. It's funny because I don't think of myself as highly polished. I don't always like the way I talk. I'm not super charismatic compared to a lot of YouTubers. I'm not going to apologize for myself in terms of this question. I'm just going to accept the compliment at face value and say thank you, even though I think most of us have imposter syndrome. By the way, if you see me moving my hands and stuff, I'm grabbing things to fidget with. I like to fidget. Here's tweezers. Here's a pencil. That's just what I do. But in the process of learning from the ground up, I can tell you a few things. First off, establish some decent audio. Make sure you have a decent mic. It doesn't need to be a great mic. Don't go down the rabbit hole of buying a lot of expensive stuff. Even a Blue Yeti will be fine for most people's purposes, at least for getting started. The big thing is talk close enough to your mic. So, just be a few inches from it at most. If you want to just really get a radio sound to it and you're only doing audio, get even closer and just talk, don't speak from your chest, just speak through your vocal cords. You'll get a feel of what that's like. Just make sure your audio is really good and you work on your articulation, which is something I've struggled with. You can hear me stumbling over myself when I talk doing this. That's just, I guess you make it your personality at some point, right? Video is far less important. Most people are mostly listening to you and maybe glancing at the screen at most. But even then, your audio is a much more important part of the comfort of people's viewing experience than what your video looks like. I just say get a decent-ish camera and then just make sure you're lit reasonably well and just play with your environment. Environment is a big part of it. I have a few studio lights and ring lights and stuff that I set up just right. You can get just cheap stuff from the store and it works pretty well if you set it up right. And then make sure your room is reasonably soundproofed. The back walls here are bare, but all in front of me is nothing but like moving blankets and foam pads and stuff, just because your setup is more important than your equipment usually. And then it's just trial and error. Everything you do, the internet's your best friend in terms of just learning basic skills. And so learn little tips, but don't fall into the temptation of buying too much stuff. That can happen really fast and start to add up. And most people are giving you suggestions are either going to have a preference for a specific product that might cost you a bit too much money, or, just be doing it as a promotion. So you always have to keep that in mind. As far as the thoughtful part goes, I could see that just because I spend so much time writing. And I would say if you're going to produce recorded content, plan out what you're going to say really well. Have a script or an outline and pare it down so that you're not rambling too much. And that helps, at least when you're getting established. Also, just know yourself, I guess, is a big thing. You get to know yourself really quickly when you're YouTubing. You learn your strengths and weaknesses, and people tell you about your strengths and weaknesses. So you really have to be ready to face up to who you are and what you're good at and not, because on the internet, people will just blurt it out as if they were walking up to you and insulting you to your face. So have a thick skin and be ready to learn from that, I suppose. If you had to, by force of course, pick a religion to belong to, which would it be? I don't know. That's a good question. My first guess would be something that was a little vaguely philosophical without being too fundamentalist or having a lot of literalist beliefs about the nature of the world, and that didn't codify your behavior in terms of just religious dictates. So basically something that allowed for humanitarian values. One trick of this is I think you have to pick your religious community as much as the religion, because people practice religions very differently. And I would have to take into account the fact that whatever religion I became a part of, I would be faking it. I don't really believe in any God or any supernatural. And so if I were to change that, I'd be changing the nature of who I was, and this question wouldn't really be relevant. So I would have to find a religion and a community that would allow me to fake my way into it and continue to comfortably practice just humanitarian values and be who I wanted to be as a person. And I would hope that religion promoted the same thing. Not a really direct answer, I guess, but hopefully it gave some sense of what I would do if I had to join a religion. How is a raven like a writing desk? Well, I guess both are made of physical matter. Both have legs. They could both be black. Edgar Allan Poe wrote on both. But, in general, to really answer this question in a meaningful way, any comparisons are going to be, if not kind of just abstract, just kind of personal. And I don't have enough of a personal connection to ravens or writing desks, writing desks as opposed to just desks in general, to give a really informed answer to this question. And I'm just very sorry about that. I gave some answers that are just, off the cuff. obvious similarities between the two, but those were pretty just generalized. I don't feel like I've done justice to your question. So maybe over the course of the next year or two, I'll get a writing desk and just see how I enjoy using that. Maybe I don't think I'm allowed to have pet ravens, but if I see them in the parking lot, I'll interact with one more. And in doing that, maybe I'll have a better sense of how both things make me feel and what connections I see there. And if you ask this again when I, solicit questions for a video like this, maybe I can give you a more meaningful answer. But for now, I'm sorry, I just don't know, just because of life experience, and it just hasn't taken me there. What D&D class and subclass would you want to be in real life? I've played D&D a literal total of once and didn't that's like I sat down once for a couple hours and played it when my son was into it. And it was with my other son, one of my other sons. I have 4 kids, and 2 of them played that game with me. And they argued some about how seriously to take the game, which I think happens with D&D. And we played for a short time, and I didn't get a sense of how to answer this question. I looked up classes and subclasses immediately after seeing this question and before I read it out loud. And subclasses are such a big, complicated thing. I don't really feel like looking at those lists help me answer this question. So I would just off the cuff say wizard, because you get to study a lot of things and magic seems cool. And so between being able to be a little bit of a bookworm and learn, which I think I'm a lifelong learner, I think something about that would appeal to me, and magic just seems fun. Beyond that, I just don't know if anything about swinging a sword or an axe, especially into another person, just appeals to me or is any kind of ambition that I have. And so I guess wizard. Which Muppet resonates with you the most? So of all the questions, this is one that it would be just really easy to be snarky about. I don't know, say animal, maybe the Swedish chef, or those 2 people who are critics and just always badmouth the show. It'd be really fun to say one of those things, but none of them would be honest. And in this case, I do have a very straightforward, literal answer, and that is Kermit the Frog. Kermit the Frog is the one you see the most. He's the one you're going to associate often with the most. And this might just feel like a easy noob answer, but it really deeply is part of me. And that's because ever since I was little, I would see Kermit the Frog both on Sesame Street and the Muppets. And he always seemed genuine and sincere, but somewhat vulnerable and hapless. And so things would happen to him, and he always seemed a little bit put upon, or, you'd always sympathize for lightheartedly bad things happening to him. And that just really grabbed me from the time I was a toddler. And I literally mean that. And so that just really resonated with me, and something about it felt like I could relate to him and sympathize with him at the same time. So my answer is Kermit the Frog. Do you think that religion is a natural part of societal evolution for any advanced species? And if so, are we likely to have grown out of it by the time aliens arrive? Yeah, religion's a natural part of us, and it's going to be with us forever. So whether the aliens land tomorrow or in, 1,000 years, if we're still here, there will still be religion with us. We see more people become non-religious, and I think that's a function of the fact that we have better knowledge at our fingers. Religion becomes less necessary as you learn more. And I see 2 thrusts to this. One is the naturalistic aspect of the world. Religion serves a purpose for summing up your immediate environment in a way that just makes quick, easy connections. And that can be helpful when you're in a survival environment, or in one where, really specific scientific knowledge is not likely to be available to you or just to be helpful to you. And that gets more useful as society advances. But we always have this deep instinct to make quick connections. And that's always going to feed a certain amount of superstition into people no matter what. You're not going to drive that out of everybody. Same thing morally. Religion gives you easy codified morals that are good enough and accessible enough without you delving into deep moral philosophy, just like you're not going to delve into deep science when you're in a survival situation, or even, early stages of civilization. You just can't go there. And so It allows you to use your intuition to get to a certain point and then just set it in stone and say everybody in society needs to follow this. Like it or not, there is a utility in that. It is better to advance to where you actually think about the consequences of your actions and, go a little farther down the trail of moral philosophy. But we weren't able to do that early on as humans. And so we developed these instincts, one, to make shortcuts about our environment, just to sum this up, I guess. And two, to establish not only easy codified laws, but religion rationalizes an in-group, out-group mentality. We have these instincts to like our group better than the other group. And that's why we find it deeply satisfying to consider ourselves better than other people. Part of us does like that, whether or not we want to grow out of our bigotry. We do have that instinct. And so religion is a way to codify that, make it something holy, and make you feel good about it, and actually like it makes you a better person to be tribalistic. And I just don't think we're ever going to get past those instincts. It's just always going to be with us. As a fellow beard wearer, I'd ask if you have any amusing facial hair stories, weird styles you tried out, famous beards you admire, etc. By the way, in editing, I just realized that this question came from Darth Calculus, who's a pretty cool guy and made a metal version of my theme song for my old channel. So, hi, Darth Calculus. Yeah, I've had facial hair to some extent since I was maybe 18, 19 years old. Most of my life, I had a goatee, not a full beard. And it's been in the last, 10 years now, I've regularly had a beard. I would do a full beard off and on, but usually a goatee. And now it's become full-on beard. Weird styles you tried out. There was a while, about 10-ish years ago, I did just a mustache thing, and I tried to grow out my mustache and do the curly mustache thing just for fun. And maybe I'll put up a couple pictures here. And I just kind of enjoyed that, so that was cool. I was a single dad at that time, and I was just doing things just to be goofy and fun and, amuse my kids and myself a little bit. As far as famous beards I admire, it's not a beard, but Sam Elliott has always had pretty cool facial hair. I think that's awesome. I would also say Tsar Nicholas. If you really look at it, he had about the perfect beard, and he was just a strikingly good-looking person. And so, as much as he wasn't a great leader, you just can't take away from him the fact that he was a good-looking guy and his beard was awesome. And that's just objectively true. All right, what about gear talk? A little tour through how you made your videos. I'm a little sad that you said made because I still make them, but I think I get what you're saying. Showing how you made the Zodanza layouts. Maybe talk about any new gear you want to get. Apologies if you've done this before. So I feel like I answered some of this question previously when somebody talked about my production values and expressed that I'm very polished and cool, which I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I'll bring that up at every opportunity that I possibly can. Showing how I made the Zodanza layouts, maybe talk about any new gear you want to get. Apologies if you've done this before. You don't have to apologize. I believe that's David. You're a cool person. I see you a lot on Zodanza. So thank you for your question, and please don't ever be sorry about it. So there are many parts of this question. Gear, I have a Audio Technica microphone. It's probably a little better than a Blue Yeti, but it's, I think, about the same price and probably fairly comparable in quality. A lot depends on preference, and most of it's technique. It just uses a USB cord. I tried mics like a Shure SM7B, which, is the standard podcasting mic. You might have seen it in a few videos before. It's a good mic, but for some reason you have to run an audio cable into a mixer, and the audio cables pick up so much interference. I can't get rid of that. I try to keep it away from other electronics and from power sources and stuff like that, or power cords. And for some reason, I just pick up enough humming that it bothers me, and I'm worried about editing it out. Live streaming, it just doesn't work for. Maybe I'll try it. I'll try using it again and see if I can edit out the hum without messing up my other audio too much. I don't know how much more to say about gear. It's pretty straightforward. Let me grab something real quick. One thing I always have to show off, because, shooting in front of a camera like this is pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of lighting yourself and stuff like that. But when I did the static face thing, which people say they miss, and that makes me sad because I feel like, this is who I am. I don't think they're saying they hate my face. I understand you like different things, and that was a fun novelty. But when I did that, I always like to show off the hat. When I did the static face thing, I would stand in front of a blue screen, which was usually just a sheet I had pinned up to my wall, and then I would key that out for my background, and then put this over my whole face. I eventually put a hole in it I could see through just a little bit, and I would key that out to have the static there. So that's how that worked. I don't know. That's the only real consequential technical thing I can think of. Zodanza layouts, those are a bunch of little dots on a black background, and I literally just drew a dot in a paint program and then reproduced those painstakingly by hand into different patterns. And I flashed those patterns in quick succession for the intro, and then grabbed stills of a couple of them to use as our backgrounds. And that's about all there is to say about that. A lot of this, at least the way I do it, because I'm not very technically proficient, is just a lot of grunt work and doing things frame by frame. And then you can use those assets for years on end. So, the work pays off, I guess. I don't know that I really want to get any new gear. I'm pretty happy with what I have, and I don't know, there's always something that could appeal to me, but I think I'm fine. It's more about now what topics I can come up with to do and focusing on content more than equipment. And so, I appreciate the question, but I've sorted through things and got into a comfortable enough place with my equipment. If I could somehow make a better mic work without interference on the audio cable, I'd be pretty stoked about that, but that's nothing I really need to buy. Why can't I find the old Prophet of Zod cartoons? Every few years, I entirely rewatch the Non-Stamp Collector and POZ cartoons, but I can't find your old cartoons anywhere. How come that, Mr. Zod? So, this question's come up a few times, and I'll just answer it conclusively here, and hopefully anybody who wonders in the future will have seen this and know. I took those down shortly after the last election because I had a little burst of nervousness about content that could get you in trouble, maybe on the grounds of theocratic laws or blasphemy laws or something like that, that didn't serve any purpose other than being, I don't know that those cartoons did much other than maybe be entertaining for some people and just be, irreverent. I feel like that's useful. It kind of takes those characters and stories off their pedestal a little bit, but I didn't find they contributed anything insightful enough that they were worth keeping compared to my just ongoing commentary, and just exposed me, and more to the point, other people to potential, pushback. And that was a big thing. For almost all of those cartoons, there were other people involved. And considering they were highly irreverent, and I didn't know whether that would be consequential for people living in our current political and social environment, I just felt like the thing to do was take them down. Obviously, I didn't take down most of my Prophet of Zod content. I don't think that makes a difference. You can't really take things off the internet, and I can't erase my footprint as, that person, even if I wanted to, which I don't. So I'm not, it's not like me trying to disappear from the internet thing, but when it was purely that, as irreverent as those cartoons were, and especially because it involved other people, I didn't want to take responsibility for having that remain out there with their names on it. And so that's why I removed it. I'm sorry if people don't like that. I can understand why they wouldn't. I can also understand how some people might think it was a cowardly move to make, but that was just what I felt like the right choice was. And so I did it. So I'm really sorry. If you specifically liked them and you'd want to see them again, I don't know, maybe email me and I could send you a link to it or something if it means that much to you. I don't know that many people ever really watch them though. In your opinion, who or what was the naked guy running away when Jesus was arrested in Mark 14:51-52? I'm a new atheist of about 2 years, but was in the cult of evangelicalism/Pentecostalism like yourself for 30 years. So that verse is pretty ambiguous. It just says that a young man was there wearing linens and he ran away without his clothing on. And so contextually speaking, I guess I guess we can conclude this person was comfortable enough with his body that he didn't mind being naked when he ran away, or he was just urgent enough about getting out of there that he didn't care if his clothes fell off. I think this person's name was probably Andrew, and not one of Jesus' immediate apostles, but that just feels right to me. And I don't know, my reading of the Bible just feels more complete if there were a person named Andrew who just kind of generally hung around Jesus and ran away and, left his clothes behind. It just kind of makes sense to me in terms of the overall story. Also, welcome out of evangelicalism, Pentecostalism. Pentecostalism is very intense. I know that firsthand. It's it's not just fundamentalist, it's not just evangelical, but because it relies so heavily on personal revelation, it puts a lot of power into leadership, especially those who are assertive and charismatic, and that's just not a great combination. So welcome out of that, and I hope life turns out great for you now. Did you have a background in animation before you, I think you mean started Prophet is Odd, or did you learn it as you went? Sorry if this question has been answered before. And yeah, again, don't apologize for questions. I enjoy them all for the most part. But if I ever don't enjoy them, it has nothing to do with this question. It's just if people are being mean. And in those cases, I'll just skip the question. And not mean to me, I mean, like, for example, if you were to reply to somebody else's comment saying that the left and the right are the same and say something negative about DEI, then you would have to apologize for that. But you don't have to apologize for asking me about if I have a background in animation. So that's totally cool. No background in animation at all. I had no background in anything at all related to producing videos or performing on screen or anything like that. I'd been a teacher, which may be related to, talking to people. But yeah, absolutely no background in animation. None. I used, it's called Vyond now. It started out as Go Animate, and you can just pick assets and select what your character's like. It looks really generic. It looks like, a business presentation, but it's an easy way to get characters and have them do little movements. And so what I would do, I wouldn't use their full product and put everybody together in a full video. I would put characters on a blue background and then just mess around with them in editing software. But that didn't require actual animation experience. It was more just moving things around in an editor. And so, yeah, I just kind of learned that as I went. Hello, Zod. Have you ever played Lego video games? Yeah, many years ago, probably 15-ish years ago, I guess. I played some Star Wars Lego video games, and I think feels like I played a Batman one. This was back when I was just playing games along with my kids. And okay, so this can mean a couple different things. I had the gaming experience playing with my kids when they were like teenagers and young adults. This was back when they were playing things on the Wii and stuff when they were really little. And I remember playing those games, but it's very vague. I don't know a whole lot about it. I remember the games were easy and that all that would happen is you would lose your little studs or whatever when you died. The game was never over and you didn't have a limited number of lives, if I'm remembering correctly. And I also remember that the Star Wars games were based on the prequels, and I really would have preferred to have some based on the classic movies, but they weren't out at the time. I think they were coming out and there was like a preview part of it, but that's all I remember. They were fun, I liked them okay. They're a nice casual game playing experience. So in short, to answer your question, the answer is yes. I'm at Arby's right now. What would you like? I would like, for your sake, that you get in your car, if you're not already in a drive-thru, and drive to an establishment that has other food than Arby's. And so then you can eat something of a different quality than that. But it sounds like there's more to your question. So no, but seriously, have you heard of Professor Dave Explains on YouTube? He's a science communicator and BS debunker. His content has been really convincing me to seek higher education. Oh, that's really good. Anything that encourages you to get a better education is great. I'd like to specialize in external ballistics, learn a second language, Japanese, and learn more about the scientific fields in general. What would you choose for a specialized education, and what second language would you learn? Also, who's your favorite comedian? If I'm cheating by asking too many questions, then I apologize, and you can be fair and pick one if you do pick one of mine. Thanks. Yeah, again, don't worry about apologizing. But in that context, if you ask a lot of questions, I can at least understand where your apology comes from. So, there's at least a rationale to it. But don't worry, I already answered the one about Arby's, and I'll do my best for the rest of these because I'm just feeling generous and I have the time, I suppose. Yeah, I've heard of Professor Dave Explains. He's really cool. My son is really into him and watches him probably more than I do. I really enjoy him, but when it gets really into details of science, I tend to lose track. He can be really fun, but some of the science explanations just get so repetitive and technical that I trail off, and so I kind of come and go with Professor Dave. I lose interest and then come back to him. That's not a criticism of him. That's exactly what he needs to do because some of the stuff is just repetition. And he's really entertaining when he talks about some people like Terrence Howard. One thing also I appreciate about him, if you look at his video library, he has his reactions and the really controversial things that get a lot of views. And then throughout them are scattered basic explanations of scientific things and not many views at all. And the fact that he does that on purpose, I really respect, especially knowing that probably impacts his algorithm. He's willing to just put that out there for the benefit of people. So I think that's really cool. What would you choose for a specialized? I really don't know for an education. What I would say right now, and this is a meaningful question to me as somebody who has one son has gone through college and I have others that might be heading in that direction, or at least in the direction of having to pick their education. Be very careful with a full 4-year degree. It's getting more and more expensive, and you really want to make sure that you're going to have a job when you come out of it and one that is going to be beneficial for you. And that's really hard to predict right now just because the job market is very volatile. Our economy is just, we don't know where that's going to go. And you don't want to be left holding a lot of debt and been not gainfully employed for 4 years and not have a lot to show for it. I hate that answer because education is valuable for its own sake, but you have to just be careful because putting yourself in a financially tenuous position is probably not worth those abstract benefits as very significant as they are. I would say pursue education as a learner to the best of your ability and whatever interests you and you think fits you personally. I can't really answer that question, but do it in a way that is going to be financially safe for you and that you can be secure. If it comes to doing it for a job, I'd say probably something more like an internship or learning on the job or getting a certificate, something that's not really long and drawn out and expensive. And then these days, you can't really rely on getting an education in something and just hopping and staying in that field. You have to be kind of nimble and move as not only the job market moves, but the nature of technology and how it impacts work. Sorry, with some of these cuts, I keep coughing, and so I have to cut them out and start talking again. If this is a career type question, just be very careful and pick something where you can adapt and learn as you go. If it's a question about scientific fields in general, it's just whatever you find interesting. Second language. The second language I would learn is the one I'm currently learning, which is Spanish. That's a very relevant language in our society just because Spanish is spoken so much. And I've also thought in terms of if I ever want to move to another country, even though other countries aren't accepting Americans as much as they used to. So yeah, I'd say Spanish just because that's the one I'm doing. I enjoy it. My best friend's mom was from Mexico, and so I'd picked up some Spanish when I was younger, and it's kind of fun to get back into it. Also, who's my favorite comedian? That's a hard one. I like a lot of stand-up comics. I've always liked John Mulaney. He's pretty good. Bo Burnham is awesome. He a lot of variety in his sketches and a lot of music and stuff. He's fun. Oh, Josh Johnson is one I've really gotten into lately. He's really funny and has a fun way about him. Problem is, he's been really ambitious, which is good in terms of pushing out material. But I think you tend to overextend yourself and your sets aren't quite as tight as they used to be. And I think he's gotten into The Daily Show or something, which is pretty cool. He went from, as far as my perception goes, a YouTube comedian to something as mainstream as The Daily Show. So that's fun. Also, Jim Gaffigan, he's fun. If you're really feeling spicy and are, have a stomach for it, Jim Jeffries can be kind of cool. I don't have one favorite. There's a lot of them who are kind of fun. So, let me look one up. Taylor Tomlinson. I didn't know how to say her last name. She was fun. She had one set that was really fun. I'm not sure if I liked the next one as much, but I felt like I should pick one who was a woman. And I did watch her within the last year and found her pretty funny. So I don't know. That's the answer to that one. And so the last question that I was going to answer that wasn't a reply to this community post, but was just a comment on one of my most recent video. I'm just curious, what do you think of religion in general? Not just the Abrahamic ones, but also things like Shintoism, Buddhism, folk religion, etc. My opinion about that is I'm not religious. I'm not super duper pro-religion, but I think this has come through in some of my answers to the other questions. Religion is largely what you make of it. So it's not just the religion itself, but the community that's practicing that religion, or the various communities and how each of them practices it. Even Christianity can be fine depending on how somebody practices it. Eastern religions I might be more inclined toward, but I don't know how much of that is actually the religion itself and how much of it is me as a Westerner seeing it as something, a more progressive or flexible alternative to the Abrahamic ones. So overall, if I were to give my answer to this question, I would say there are some benefits to religion. I think I explained this before when answering a previous question when I talked about how, especially in early cultures, it helps you survive and, form in-groups and stuff like that, makes society kind of cohesive. But I think in general, whether it's a folk religion, even just a personal sense of spirituality, Eastern religion or an Abrahamic one, all religion inherently takes certain shortcuts. And so those shortcuts can be useful, but they're not ideal. They're not ideal for helping you understand the universe physically or scientifically, and they're not really precise in helping you understand morality and the impacts of our actions. They can help guide you, they can help inspire you, but they're always doing it in ways that involves inserting spirituality or the supernatural into things you don't know. And there's something imprecise about that I find can always lead to some accidental harm. And if I'm going to try to be the best person I can be, to understand the world around me the best I can, and to try to do best by other people, I would prefer to do that with a really clear-headed understanding of the consequences of my action and how they either build up other people or tear them down or hurt them. And I think religion just clouds that. It's a good stepping stone to help, provide a little bit of a framework for understanding stuff, but that framework is vague enough, imprecise enough, and based on enough superstition that it's just going to lead you a little bit astray. It doesn't have to lead any individual person astray, but if you get to the right place while practicing a religion, you're doing it based on your gut level inclination while following the imprecise paths that religion takes you on. And you're getting there by a combination of accident and intuition. I would just prefer to make sure I get there through clear-headed thinking and actually weighing the one thing I know my actions do, which is impact people within the physical universe. And so that's what I think of religion. It's fine. It has its uses, especially when you're not in a position to delve to the bottom of moral philosophy and science and stuff like that. But in the end, they're not all equal. Even within a religion, the practice is not always equal, but there's just enough pitfalls there that I would choose to avoid if I could. So those are my answers to all the questions that I got. I hope you enjoyed them. I tried to make them fun, but also, actually answer the questions. And if nothing else, just let some of who I am come through, which I think is what people want in things like this. If you have other questions you'd like to ask me, please, you can put them in the comments of this video, but if you ever want me to answer you in another video, if I do one of these in the future, best thing to do is keep that question in your back pocket and throw it onto a community post if I ask you. And, if you're a patron or want to become one, you can always ask me on Patreon and I'll make sure to get to yours first. Wink, wink. And if you have any responses to these answers or anything you'd like to say about them, definitely put them in the comments of this one, and that always helps the video. If you're curious, if you want to stick around, I can talk a little bit about what's behind me. Nobody asked me, but hey, I can answer the questions I wasn't asked too, right? So I'm just sitting here in a basement. Right next to me here, by the way, this is the table I sat at when I would sit a little further back. I've decided I like sitting closer, I think, I feel like it looks a little better even if I am a little close to the camera. I feel like my photography doesn't come out really well when I sit back, and I'm not sure I like the overall look of it. But yeah, this is the table I used to sit at, and there's a puzzle on it, and that's partly why I can't drag that over is because of the way we had things arranged in the house. I had to put a jigsaw puzzle on that I haven't finished, and I don't know how soon I'm going to finish it. Back behind me, there's a couple things. There's a picture right there. It says, I don't know if you can see it really well right now. It says Sneetches. It's a Dr. Seuss thing. And the reason I have something as random as that is because I was just out at a thrift store looking around with my son, and I saw that, and it was like $2, so I got it. Back here, there's a picture of Einstein, which I just thought was cool. Same son. I don't know how he ended up being in the middle of all the stuff I have back here. He got that at a garage sale for like $5, and when he moved, he left it here. And so I just put it up because it took up some space, and also putting it on the wall got it out of my way. Back behind me, let me turn on a light so you can see better. All right, I don't know if that helps you see anything, but down at the bottom, we have right there, that's a light bright. My wife gave that to me because she thought it would be cool in the background, and so I put it there. Problem is the lights don't stay on. They turn on for a minute and then they shut off. Otherwise, that could look pretty cool. In fact, let me turn it on here real quick. See, that's what it would look like if it was on. So there would be a lit up elephant balancing on a ball back there if I was able to keep that on. But it's going to shut off. You know, what I might do is just wire a light bulb in there that will just stay on, and I don't know, maybe rig something up. Who knows? Right above that is just a clockwork thing. It's a little project somebody gave us for Christmas once, I think a long time ago, and my kids put it together, and I just thought it'd be fun to have there. Up above that, you probably recognize that as a TIE fighter. My son made that out of Legos. Well, it's a Lego kit, and he left that home. I ended up with a lot of stuff that he left home and just put it on a shelf so that there could be stuff behind me. Unfortunately, I haven't really come up with a way to light that well enough that looks good without turning on my overhead light, and I don't necessarily like that overhead light. Right next to that, there, I turned that one on too. It's a Prophet Azad thing that somebody made me a long time ago. It's etched in glass, and it lights up. But it's battery powered, so it kept running out of batteries, and so I guess I just quit getting around to turning it on. Up above, it's just a bunch of books. And there's like, you can't see it very well at all, but there's a windmill. It's one of those stackable block things my youngest son and I made once. And so I just put it there for something to look at. So anyway, there's that. So I don't know if any of you are at all curious about what's behind me when I talk on here. There was a rocking chair back there. I felt like it looked a little cluttered, but fun fact, that was a rocking chair that my mom used to rock me in when I was a little baby, and she eventually gave it to me because she didn't have room for it. And so I put it there, but then I moved it. By the way, I need to show you one other thing. If you look out the door there, that's what's behind those curtains. That's why there's big black curtains there. It looks like it kind of, I don't know. I don't like the curtains. They just put this black background behind me. But there's a door there, and you can see snow out there. It's super cold on the other side of the door. Where I record down here is pretty cold. But those curtains cover that up and also keep it a little bit warmer in here. So all that's incredibly rambly. I didn't shut that curtain all the way, but oh well. All that's incredibly rambly, and I just thought, I don't know if anybody's curious about what's in the background, but if you are, I've satisfied your curiosity, and if not, I put this at the end of the video for a reason. So yeah, that's that. I hope you enjoyed the answers to these questions, and you all have a good day. Bye.